There's a basic aspect of MGTOW that, even up until about 2 years ago, I still didn't really understand, which is this sort of withdrawal of men from mainstream society, and later on, also a withdrawal of men from women, right? Of ending up becoming a monk or ending up living a celibate life. Even a few years ago, I couldn't really picture that. How does a guy get to the point of like maybe not having a girlfriend anymore, or maybe not having any more casual relationships, you know? Like, no way. I wouldn't get to the point of being celibate either. But you have to understand that this is also kind of a natural consequence, because one thing that unites, or rather defines, MGTW in general is the fact that the guy is against forming a legal bond with women, and is also against becoming a father these days. Because of the laws, the culture, the toxicity of women, and all that. Anyway, but the first part would be distancing yourself from the simps, the normies, the blue pills, and even in some cases, the purple pills. That makes total sense because as you develop an internal validation mechanism, you just can't interact anymore or have empathy for people who are still operating with an external validation mechanism. Even though many times they also start to antagonize you. They don't want to spend time with you, or they kind of want to convert you, right? To make you go back to the way you were before. This is something that's not just about MGTOW. It's even true for PUAs. I think even Rollo Tomasi mentioned it in his book, The Rational Male. It's like this. As a guy starts taking the red pill, he starts changing his behavior, and the people who knew him before, they start thinking that you're trying too hard to be someone you're not, you know? That you're putting your effort in the wrong direction, that you should go back to being who you were before. And for MGTOW, it's the same thing. So you end up distancing yourself from these people simply because it's inconvenient. And also because as you start developing an internal validation mechanism, you begin to develop a master morality, right? Anyone who's read anything by Nietzsche will understand what I'm talking about. Because people who still have an external validation mechanism, they still operate with a slave morality. When you develop a master morality, an internal validation mechanism, you can no longer interact with or empathize with these people. Often, you don't even see a point in spending time with them. You might have a relationship with them, maybe academic, maybe professional, but in general, you'll see that the way they behave isn't compatible with the way you behave, and often you don't have much to learn from them. And I also mentioned the inconvenience that many times they want to keep trying to convert you to their lifestyle or certain ideas they have, and you just don't care about that. From the moment you have an internal validation mechanism, a master's morality, you just want to mind your own business, and you expect everyone else to do the same. So you don't really feel like interacting with these people, especially when it comes to relationships with women. Reaching a monk level, a level of celibacy, there are several factors involved. Right in the middle of it all, the first and main one is laws. I've already discussed this here in that video. The Trench War, TFM has already talked about this. Marcos from Metaphysics of MGTOW, he predicted this about 2 or 3 years ago, that at first, MGTOW was simply don't get married and don't have kids. But as women, through the government, keep pushing for the government to invade more and more of these relationship spaces between men and women, there would come a time when women and the government would reach the trenches of dating, right? Now, we already see the introduction of domestic violence laws, family law tricks, even alimony for dating, just like they did with common law marriage. Then you also see them starting to get involved in casual relationships with things like yes means yes and me too. And then there are people who say, no, just stick with prostitutes and you'll be safe. No, my friend. There are already false accusations. There are already pregnancy scams with prostitutes. So just from the legal aspect alone, because of the way women use the state to impose their will in relationships between men and women, trying to control men in every possible way, something that, for those who understand female behavior, know is actually something that makes them unhappy. So men, just because of the laws, they have to keep stepping back. They have to move toward a celibate lifestyle because every safe haven, every place they used to escape to is starting to be destroyed, right? And then there's another factor too. Besides this legal aspect, we can also talk about today's toxic culture. This normalization of open relationships, normalization of cheating, women being extremely promiscuous. But there's another issue here that needs to be addressed, which is actually something I could call this way a kind of dynamic, like the stock market, you know? It's obvious that a guy who's red pill realizes that in every relationship between a man and a woman, the dynamic is always going to be one where the man is investing more and giving more than he's getting back from the relationship. Women behave like this. You can't expect them to contribute equally in a relationship. And what if they start contributing more? Either they're gonna dump you or they're gonna cheat. So even if the guy is in a situation where he's just dating or just having casual relationships, there comes a point where it gets tiring. It's kind of like that stock market dynamics. How many times are you going to invest in something and not get any return until the moment comes when you say, man, I give up. It's just not worth it anymore. Because, like I said before, right? There's the cultural issue. It's getting worse and worse, more and more anti man. Women's behavior is getting more toxic because they're more hysterical, they're more insecure. Because they see that they don't have the same happiness, the same security that their mothers and grandmothers had, and then they start taking it out on the rest of the world, you know? But it's not up to men to solve the problem. It's not men who have to fix the problems that feminism created. And men aren't responsible for fixing women's hangups either, you know? If they're adults, they need to deal with it themselves. So there's this legal issue, and there's also the question of how many times you're going to invest in something. With no return, there's also the issue of women's toxicity. But there's also another factor here, which is this. Men have always been the protector and the provider. He has always offered more in the relationship with a woman because he was leaving a legacy. He was going to leave descendants, he was going to leave an inheritance, he was going to build a family, right? For the MGTO man, that has no value. Because the first rule of MGTO is that the guy doesn't get legally involved with a woman, right? Not getting married, not having a civil union, and not having children, right? So it doesn't make sense for the man. For MGTO, this whole idea of self-sacrifice, which is what's expected of men, which is the expression of masculine love, right? Which is the guy sacrificing himself for the woman and sacrificing himself for the children. From the moment that an MGTO man doesn't get married and doesn't have children, he's not going to keep sacrificing himself for a woman who won't be his wife, with whom he won't have kids, even if he has a girlfriend or casual relationships. So, obviously, the guy will end up abandoning that kind of relationship too. And maybe a final factor we can mention, which people don't talk about much, is this. It's the very issue of declining libido, right? As the man gets older, his libido decreases, and he spends less and less time in his life seeking female company and seeking sex. So, all these consequences, for various reasons, the man ends up distancing himself from women and ends up adopting this lifestyle. Monk in the celibate lifestyle, it's a natural consequence. It's a natural consequence, which has both internal and external factors, you know? So that's why I often say there are MGTWs who are reluctant and there are MGTWs who are resolute. The reluctant ones, they're waiting for a better offer to see if in one of these situations they still try to get involved with a woman, try to go back to the plantation. The resolute ones are those who have already made up their minds. They're not going back. Maybe if the laws get better, they might go back to casual relationships, to dating, but most likely they'll never go back to even considering marriage or having kids, right? In the same way, for everything in your life, there's a right moment. If that moment passes, if an opportunity comes up later, you might not feel like it anymore and just let go of it. And the thing is, naturally, it doesn't matter if women try to negotiate or solve the problem somehow, or if the government does it too. The point is, the more time passes and the longer it takes, more and more reluctant MGT DAWs will end up becoming resolute. Because, like I said, it's kind of a natural consequence. Even I myself, a few years ago, I didn't understand this dynamic. I didn't understand the cycle. I couldn't imagine how someone could reach that level. I thought it might be something active, that you have to actively make an effort to reach that level. But no, it's something that happens naturally, almost in a passive way. The red pill cycle fit is a transformation, but there's no active effort. It's not like the guys at the gym working out to become a beast, to turn into something else, you know? It's something that happens kind of passively, kind of naturally. For that to happen, you just need to sort of open your eyes and start seeing reality as it really is. Acknowledge it, instead of trying to live in an illusion and adapting yourself to it.